There is a silent war being waged not with bullets or bombs, but with frequencies, symbols, and the very architecture of thought itself. It is a war so subtle that most never realize they are enlisted in a battle they did not choose. The battlefield, your consciousness, the weapon, distraction, deception, and the slow erosion of your ability to think beyond the confines of the illusion. Imagine, for a moment, that reality is not a fixed construct, but a fluid dream, shaped by unseen hands. Some of these hands belong to ancient forces, others to modern architects of control, all working consciously or not to dim the light of human awareness. The evidence is everywhere, hidden in plain sight. In the hypnotic glow of screens that steal our focus, in the carefully crafted narratives that dictate what we fear and desire, in the numbing rhythms of a society that discourages deep questioning. This is not conspiracy, it is pattern recognition. History whispers to us through the fragments of lost wisdom, through the esoteric teachings that were once reserved for initiates, through the myths and sacred texts that speak of a time when humanity walked closer to the divine. But something changed. A veil descended. Knowledge was fragmented, buried, rewritten. And now, in an age of unprecedented technological advancement, we find ourselves more disconnected than ever from nature, from each other, and most dangerously, from our own souls. Yet, there is a reason you feel the pull toward awakening. There is a reason certain truths resonate like a forgotten song. Beneath the noise, beneath the layers of conditioning, your higher self remembers. It knows that consciousness is not merely a byproduct of the brain, but a fundamental force of the universe, one that can be amplified or suppressed, expanded or erased. The erasure is not always violent. It is often gentle, a slow lullaby of complacency. It is the gradual replacement of curiosity with consumption, of wisdom with information, of silence with endless noise. It is the systematic dismantling of the inner voice that whispers, "There is more to this life than what you've been told." But here's the secret they do not want you to know. Consciousness cannot be destroyed, only obscured. And what has been hidden can be uncovered. What has been suppressed can be reclaimed. This is not a call to fear, but to awareness. Not to paranoia, but to sovereignty. The fight is not against some shadowy them, it is against forgetfulness itself. It is the struggle to remember who you truly are beneath the layers of imposed identity. It is the reclamation of attention, of will, of the sacred fire of awareness that has been methodically dampened. This is not just philosophy, it is survival. For if consciousness is the lens through which we perceive reality, then to dull, it is to render humanity blind in a world that demands sight. To fight back is not to rage against machines or institutions, but to awaken the slumbering giant within the untapped potential of a mind unshackled from limitation. The journey begins with a single, irrevocable realization. You are under a spell, and like all spells, this one can be broken. The greatest trick ever played on humanity was convincing us that we are powerless, that our perceptions are fixed, our reality unchangeable, and our consciousness nothing more than a flickering byproduct of neurons firing in the dark. But what if the opposite is true? What if consciousness is the foundation, the very fabric of existence, and everything else, including the systems that seek to suppress it, is merely an illusion built upon its surface? To understand how consciousness is being erased, we must first recognize the mechanisms at play. These are not crude, heavy-handed impositions, but refined, nearly invisible systems of influence, some ancient, some modern, all designed to keep humanity in a state of passive reception rather than active creation. The 3 pillars of suppression. 1. The distraction engine. We live in an age of unprecedented sensory overload, a constant barrage of information, entertainment, and triviality designed to fracture attention. The modern world is a labyrinth of flashing screens, endless notifications, and algorithmic feeds that keep the mind in a perpetual state of shallow engagement. This is no accident. A distracted mind is a docile mind, one that never lingers long enough on a single thought to question its origin. The more fractured our focus, the harder it becomes to access deeper states of awareness, the kind that births revelation. 2. The illusion of separation. One of the most potent lies ever sold is the idea that we are isolated beings, disconnected from each other and the cosmos. This belief breeds fear, competition, and a desperate clinging to external validation. Yet every mystical tradition, from the Vedas to the Kabbalah, speaks of an underlying unity and interconnected web of consciousness that binds all things. By convincing us we are alone, the systems of control ensure we never tap into the true power of collective awakening. 3. The hijacking of language and symbol. Words and symbols are not neutral. They are carriers of meaning, and whoever controls their definitions shapes reality itself. Over centuries, sacred concepts have been diluted, inverted, or stripped of power. Love has been commodified, God has been institutionalized, and magic has been relegated to fantasy. Even the word consciousness has been reduced to a clinical term, stripped of its vast cosmic implications. When language is hollowed out, so too is thought. The inversion of truth. A recurring theme in esoteric teachings is the idea that the world operates on inversions, that what is presented as truth is often its opposite. Democracy becomes control masked as freedom. Education becomes indoctrination disguised as enlightenment. Spirituality becomes dogma rather than direct experience. The more a society claims to value awakening, the more sophisticated its methods of suppression become. This is why so many seekers fall into trap-chasing enlightenment through rigid systems, looking for answers outside themselves or waiting for some external savior to lift the veil. But the truth is far more radical. The veil is not out there. It is within. And the only way to dissolve it is to recognize that it was never real to begin with. The awakening counter strategy. If these are the methods of suppression, then the path to liberation must be their inverse. Reclaiming attention. The first act of rebellion is to withdraw from the endless noise. Meditation, deep reading, and periods of intentional silence are not just practices. They are acts of defiance against a world that profits from your distraction. Remembering interconnection. The moment you realize you are not alone, that your thoughts, emotions, and energy ripple through the collective is the moment you step out of the illusion of separation. Decoding reality. Language and symbols can be reclaimed. By studying etymology, sacred geometry, and the hidden meanings behind myths, we begin to see through the constructs that have been imposed upon us. This is not a passive process. It is a deliberate, sometimes uncomfortable awakening one that requires questioning everything you have been taught. But the reward is nothing less than the rediscovery of your true nature. An infinite consciousness temporarily wearing the cloak of the human experience. There exists a language older than words, a current of meaning that flows beneath the surface of myths, sacred texts, and even modern stories. These are not mere fictions, they are coded transmissions, maps left behind by those who understood the true nature of reality and the forces that seek to obscure it. To grasp the depth of the war on consciousness, we must learn to read these symbols not as ancient relics, but as urgent messages meant for us, Now, the prison of the senses. One of the most enduring allegories of suppressed consciousness is Plato's cave. Chained prisoners, mistaking shadows on a wall for reality, live their entire lives in a manufactured illusion. When one escapes and sees the truth, the fire casting the shadows, the vast world beyond he returns to free the others, only to be met with ridicule and violence. This is not just philosophy. It is a mirror of our world. The cave today is far more sophisticated. The shadows are no longer crude silhouettes, but high-definition projections, news cycles, social media personas, political theater all designed to keep us fixated on a manufactured reality. The chains are not iron, but psychological. The fear of being ostracized for questioning the narrative, the comfort of believing we are free when we have merely exchanged physical shackles for digital ones. But the most chilling parallel is this. Those who control the cave do not want you to know there's a way out, and if you try to show others, you risk being labeled mad, dangerous, or a heretic. The Sleeping King and the Wasteland. In Arthurian legend, the land becomes barren when its rightful ruler, the once and future king, falls into an enchanted slumber. The kingdom withers, its people lost, waiting for a return they can barely remember. This is not just a tale of medieval romance. It is a metaphor for humanity's dormant sovereignty. The Sleeping King is our collective higher consciousness, the part of us that knows how to wield true power not over others, but over the illusions that bind us. The wasteland is the world we've built in its absence. A civilization starved of meaning, drowning in consumption, where the sacred has been replaced by the synthetic. But legends always carry a hidden key. The king does not wake by chance. He wakes when the landmen remember him. When enough individuals begin to question the enchantment, to seek the grail of true awareness, the spell begins to crack. The Tower of Babel Revisited. The biblical story of Babel is often taught as a cautionary tale about human arrogancia, people united by language, building a tower to heaven, only to be scattered by divine intervention. But there is another reading. What if the confusion of tongues was not punishment, but protection? What if the tower was not a path to the divine, but a weapona, means of centralizing control under a single, monolithic system? The fragmentation that followed may have been the universe's way of preserving diversity of thought, preventing total dominion by any one ideology. Now, consider our modern age. A new tower is being built not of brick, but of data. A global system where algorithms dictate perception, where dissent is silenced under the guise of community standards, where the very concept of truth is up for grabs. The warning of Babel echoes. Any system that seeks to homogenize consciousness is a system destined to collapse under its own weight. The alchemical marriage. In esoteric traditions, the great work of alchemy was never about turning lead into gold. It was about the transformation of the self, the marriage of opposites within the psyche that births the philosopher's stone, the awakened mind. Today, we are bombarded with false dichotomies: left versus right, science versus spirit, self versus other, all designed to keep us fractured. The alchemist knows the truth. Transcendence lies in integration. When we stop seeing the world in binaries and begin to perceive the unity beneath the illusion, we perform the true magnum opus. The call to the modern initiate. These stories are not relics. They are living blueprints. The cave, the sleeping king, the tower, the alchemical wedding, they are all telling us the same thing. The war for consciousness is the only war that matters, because it is the war that determines all others. To fight back is not to storm castles or hack servers, though some may choose those battles. It is to become the hero of your own myth-toe, question the shadows, to awaken the king within, to refuse the tower's false unity, and to perform the alchemy of self-realization. The symbols were left for us. The question is, will we read them in time? The most dangerous knowledge is not the kind that remains abstract, but the kind that demands action. To recognize the mechanisms eroding consciousness is one thing, to resist them is another. This is where philosophy becomes practice, where insight translates into lived defiance. The war for your mind is not fought in some distant metaphysical realm. It is waged in the choices you make every single day, reclaiming your cognitive sovereignty. The first battleground is attention. In an economy that trades in focus, every moment of undistracted awareness is an act of rebellion. This goes beyond digital detoxes or productivity. Hacksit is a fundamental reorientation of how you engage with reality. The 30-second rule. Before reaching for your phone, before absorbing any media, pause. Ask, is this serving my consciousness or leeching from it? That tiny space between stimulus and response is where autonomy begins. Information fasting. Just as the body needs periods without food to detoxify, the mind needs intervals free from input. A day without news, a week without social media feeds are not deprivations but recalibrations. Depth over breadth. The system wants you skimming surfaces. Fight back by diving deep into a single book for months, into a skill until it becomes mastery, into a conversation until it cracks open new worlds. Language as liberation technology. Words are spells. The terms you use shape what you can perceive. Reclaiming language is alchemy. Etymology as awakening. When you discover that spirit comes from the Latin spiritus, breath, and anxiety from the Greek anko, to choke, you begin to see how language encodes states of being. Study the roots and you start decoding reality. Banishing hollow words. Stop using terms that carry hidden agendas. Consumer, content, algorithm. These are not neutral. Replace them with conscious alternatives. Participant, art, influence pathways. Silence as speech. Sometimes the most powerful statement is to withhold words entirely. Not every thought needs expression. Not every reaction deserves amplification. The underground economy of energy. They want you exhausted, not just physically, but psychically. The modern world is a vampiric architecture designed to siphon your vital force. The attention harvest. Every click, scroll, and like is a microtransaction where you pay with your life energy. Start auditing these exchanges like a mystic accountant. Chronergy, the magic of time. Your hours are your most precious currency. Spend them as deliberately as a monk spends prayer. Ask, if this day were my last, would I gift these moments to the machine? Bioenergetic hygiene. Certain places, people, and media leave you drained. Others replenish you. Map these like an occultist charts, lee lines, then adjust your life's geography accordingly. The praxis of parallel societies. You cannot fully opt out of the system, but you can build alternatives within its cracks. Shadow libraries. The internet's true marvel isn't cat videos, but the underground archives preserving banned knowledge. Contribute to these digital monasteries. Unmonetized spaces. Create gatherings where phones are forbidden, where conversations unfold without the pressure to be content. These become zones of psychic sanctuary. Neo-guilds. Form small circles where skills are traded outside the market. Someone teaches dream interpretation. Another shares foraging. Another decrypts sacred geometry. Barter becomes alchemy. The weaponization of beauty. In a world that thrives on uglessness, both aesthetic Enmeralth, deliberate cultivation of beauty, becomes insurgency. Iconoclasm of the ugly. Refuse to live surrounded by visual noise. Curate your environments with the precision of a Zen gardener. Art as time travel. When you create or consume true art, you momentarily step outside the timeline of control. A poem can be a wormhole, a symphony, a siege engine against banality. Sacred aesthetics. Wear clothes, arrange spaces, prepare food as if each act were a ritual because it is. The mundane becomes mystical through intentionality. The final test. Living as if you were free. All these practices circle one unshakable truth. You demonstrate your liberation through embodiment. No amount of theory matters if you still jump at every notification, speak in borrowed phrases, and beg institutions for permission to exist. The ultimate resistance is to live fully, fiercely, unconcerned with whether the machine notices your desertion. For when enough people walk away from the illusion ceases to have power. Not through protests or petitions, but through the quiet revolution of awakened presence. We stand at the precipice of a great remembering. The war for consciousness is not some distant metaphysical conflict. It is the defining struggle of our age, playing out in the quiet spaces between thoughts, in the moments before we reach for our phones, in the courage to question what we've been told is real. What began as an exploration of suppression has revealed something far more profound. The indestructible nature of true awareness. They can obscure it, distort it, even make us forget it exists, but consciousness itself cannot be erased. Like the sun behind clouds, it remains, waiting for us to look up and remember its light. The grand realization. All the symbols, all the systems, all the ancient warnings lead to one irreducible truth. You are not who you've been told you are. You are not merely a consumer, a voter, a data point. You are the universe becoming aware of itself. Every limitation you've accepted, every fear you've internalized, every story you've believed about your smallness, these are the shadows on Plato's cave wall. The most shocking revelation isn't that they're erasing consciousness. It's that they've only succeeded because we've been complicit in our own forgetting. The good news? That means we hold the power to reverse it. The call to awakened action. This is not a passive understanding. Realization without action is just another form of sleep. Here's what's being asked of you now. Become ungovernable. Not through violence or chaos, but through radical self-possession. When the world pulls left, pause. When outrage is demanded, question. When fear is broadcast, turn inward. Practice sacred economics. Every dollar is a vote, every attention a sacrament. Support what nourishes consciousness, withdraw energy from what degrades it. This is how systems change not through revolution, but through realignment. Build the new in the shell of the old. Create pockets of awakened living. Start discussion groups that operate by different rules. Make art that bypasses the mind and speaks directly to soul. Grow food, share skills, trade value outside the machine. Embody your knowing. The greatest teaching isn't what you say, but how you live. As you transform, you give others permission to do the same. Your calm becomes contagious. Your clarity becomes a beacon. The final invitation. They want you to believe the battle is already lost, that all the great awakenings happened in some distant past or will come in some uncertain future. But the secret is this: the most important moment is always now. Right now, as you read these words, the choice presents itself again. Will you hit like and move on? Or will you close this screen and do something unprecedented with your next breath? Will you add this to your collection of interesting ideas? Or will you let it change you at the cellular level? The veil is thin, the tools are in your hands. The time is not coming. It's here. What happens next depends entirely on what you decide to do with this moment. Will you remember who you are?